Welcome to the Arrive Podcast, the U.S. Immigration Law Podcast for Canadians. I'm your host, Jeremy Richards, and today I have a unique co-host, Rachel Sparacino, one of our associates.
Hi.
So this is her first podcast, but she's been working with Richards and Drusik now for
2 years as of today.
2-year anniversary, and you get to be on a podcast?
I know, it's a special prize for me.
And Rachel practices everything we do at Richards and Drusik, so she's well versed with working with Canadians, and that's what we do on this podcast. We talk about U.S. immigration for Canadians, and today will be no different. We'll be talking about U.S. immigration for Canadians. And specifically today on this podcast, we're going to be talking about TN visa status for Canadians and the degree requirements for TN visas and working in the United States, and determining whether or not you're eligible for a TN visa based on your credentials. And it can get a little bit confusing. And there's some common things that we run into when we're dealing with Canadians and qualifying for TN status in the United States. So Rachel, what are the ones that you work with? What are some common degree issues that you've seen?
So some common degree issues that come up in the TN visa area are individuals who obtained a degree outside of North America. So the TN visa is designed to help Canadians and Mexican citizens come and work in the United States under the US-Canada-Mexico Agreement, or the USMCA. And in the USMCA, there are specific degree requirements for each of the professions there, and those degrees need to be from North America, or they're supposed to be. So when you have a foreign national who earned their degree from, say, India, and they got a computer science degree.
And India is one of the most common ones,
India is
right?
one of the most common.
Will immigrate to Canada, then they'll become a Canadian citizen, and then they'll want to come to the U.S.
Correct. And so now that they're Canadian citizens, they're eligible for the TN, but they have to meet those degree requirements. And oftentimes when they have a degree from India, you have to make sure that it aligns with a North American degree.
So let's talk about the most common profession that we run into for Indian professionals coming to the U.S. And I think we would agree that's a computer systems analyst.
Yes.
And that's where we run into some issues with degree requirements. So let's talk about first, what are the degree requirements for a computer systems analyst?
So a computer systems analyst either needs to have a baccalaureate degree, which for the US and Canada is a 4-year degree, or they can qualify with a post-secondary diploma or post-secondary certificate. Those are 2-year degrees from either Canada or Mexico.
So that's a major clarification.
Yes.
So a post-secondary certificate is from?
Canada or the United States.
And it has to be Canada or the United States. And
Correct.
It's a 2-year certificate.
Correct.
And a post-secondary diploma?
Post-secondary diploma for Canada and the US.
Correct.
Post-secondary certificate is Mexico.
But they're all 2-year degrees.
Yes.
And they're all earned from either Canada, Mexico, or the United States.
Correct.
Those are the only diplomas or certificates that qualify.
Correct.
And that can be a major obstacle. So if you got a diploma or certificate from another country outside of North America, it does not meet the criteria for TN status.
Exactly. And when you're using a post-secondary diploma or certificate, you also have to have 3 years of experience as well to qualify you for the TN. And that experience has to be in a computer systems analyst field or a related field. It can't just be 3 years of experience working in
hospitality.
Exactly.
Yeah, or whatever.
So
now let's talk about that experience component, right? Most people say, here's my resume, I have experience. For TN status, if you're applying for TN, either at the border or by mail with USCIS, how do you prove that experience?
So when it comes to proving your experience, it has to be done through former employer letters. And those letters have to be on their former employer's letterhead, signed by someone who can attest to the duties that you performed. And it needs to be detailed as to the job title that you had, the duties that you had, as well as the specific dates that you worked there.
Full-time, part-time status.
Exactly. How many hours per week did you work?
And typically it's a post-education experience. If you have an internship or something that was involved, that was during part of your education, that's not going to count. So they want to see post-graduation.
Correct. Post-graduation, and those experience letters, they can't overlap with one another. So if you had 2 jobs that you worked at the same time, they likely aren't going to count for 2 different.
Unless they're both part-time and then they equate to full-time, right?
Yes.
Correct. So the key there is you can't use a resume. A resume is self-serving. You can put whatever you want on a resume. That does not qualify to meet the criteria of establishing your credentials for TN status. It has to be in the form of a former employer letter or a current employer letter. Sometimes you're still working for somebody. Maybe you have a Canadian employer sending you to the US, but you can't self-attest. It has to be attested by third party, typically your former or current employer.
Exactly. So when it comes to, as well, going back to the computer systems analyst, a lot of times we'll see, going back to the baccalaureate degree, people from, again, India who have a computer science degree. They'll typically be 3 years degrees. They'll have to get that evaluated. They won't qualify for that post-secondary diploma.
Unless it equates to a 4-year U.S. degree, which in most
with the
cases
baccalaureate, they'll have to get equated to, correct. So they can't just take their their Indian degree that's 3 years and say, I have the 3 years and my experience, I want to come as a computer systems analyst.
And that's because it doesn't qualify as a 4-year degree, but it also doesn't qualify as a 2-year diploma or certificate because it wasn't earned in North America, Canada, US, or Mexico.
Exactly.
So oftentimes the Indian citizens that were trained that way or educated that way are out of luck when it comes to qualifying for TN status as a computer systems analyst because those requirements are rigid, they're not flexible. So you can run into that issue. But if you were educated in Canada, you have a typical 4-year Canadian degree, then you're going to be fine. Or if you're educated in Canada and you received a diploma, then you're going to be fine as long as that's combined with 3 years of experience on top of it. And there are some other professions too that are a little bit unique when it comes to qualifying for TN status. There are actually 2 of them that you can qualify for with no education whatsoever. So people will gravitate to them and say, I'm this because I don't have a degree. And they'll say, I'm going to be this profession. And what is that profession that we see?
Management consultant all the time. Because for management consultant, you can qualify with a bachelor degree.
Best way to qualify.
Best way to qualify. But you can also qualify with either having 5 years of experience in management consulting or 5 years of experience in the field that you're consulting on. So if I wanted to get a TN as a management consultant, I could show that I have 5 years of experience practicing law. And if I'm consulting on law, then I could qualify for a TN as a management consultant.
And people gravitate towards that because of that component where, hey, I've worked in this field for 5 years, so I'm just going to apply for that because my degree doesn't qualify or I don't have a degree. Be careful. Management consultant profession is very specific. A management consultant, so for TN status, what does a management consultant do?
So a management consultant essentially comes in to a company and looks at their procedures and guides them and how to essentially improve their practices, how to improve their bottom line, how to be more cost efficient. And you can be a management consultant coming in independently to serve a U.S. client. So if you were an independent contractor and you were coming in, or you could go work for Deloitte and like a consulting company and be an employee of them and service their clients, consulting their clients. But the point is that you're a supernumerary position, you're hands off, you're not implementing anything, you are just...
Unless you're working for an actual consulting company.
Unless you're working for an actual
you're not an employee, right?
Correct.
You're a hired gun coming in to provide advice.
You typically have a consulting agreement, a consulting timeline.
You're not a manager, you're not a director, you don't have any direct reports, you don't manage a part of the organization, and that's usually where people step in and say, hey, I want to be a management consultant because I got this job offer.
I'm a manager.
Director of sales or manager. And that's not on the TN professions list because it's not a qualifying profession.
Right.
And management consultant is not your fix. Typically, those roles fall under an H-1B visa. And people will say, well, that's a lottery and it's going to take forever to get. Well, unfortunately, that's the way it works for that type of a role. And the TN we'd have to look at that to determine whether or not that position could qualify as a consultant. But in most cases like that, you're not going to qualify as a consultant. Another one that's very unique is hotel or restaurant manager. So if you look at the TN professions and occupations list, it can be tricky because it just says to have a bachelor's degree in this, it doesn't specifically state that it has to be in a certain area. But we've received guidance that says that when it says bachelor's degree, and let's talk about computer systems because we've been there, then it means you should have a bachelor's degree in computer science or a closely related field. You can use something that's closely related. And closely related typically means that at least 50% of your coursework was in that field. Now, there is a profession, hotel and restaurant manager, where that's not the case.
Right. They specifically say that your degree has to be in hotel management. That's the only profession where they specifically designate a degree requirement. And only in that. Correct. You can't get a degree in
business management.
Correct. It has to be hotel management.
Or accounting, or something that could arguably qualify you.
Right. You can't use the closely related argument for a hotel manager. It has to be hotel management.
And that one also does have a bachelor's and a diploma certificate component as well. But again, either or have to be in hotel or restaurant management. And if you're relying on certificate or diploma, then 3 years experience. And then there's one more that comes to mind when we're talking about unique qualifications. Scientific
technician, technologist.
That is another one, right, where there isn't a specific degree component.
Correct. You just have to show that they have experience in
Practical
the theory.
Experience, theoretical knowledge and experience in that field, right?
Correct. And
Which
there's only
could mean a
certain
diploma.
fields, too, that it can be in. It can only be in, like, biology, chemistry, engineering. It's not limited to just every field.
Any profession you choose.
Exactly.
And it's not, and it doesn't apply to the trades, for example. So it's very specific as to which professions. But in there as well, you can qualify without a degree as long as you have related experience that would equate to it. And the other unique qualification of a scientific technician, technologist.
So you have to be working under a licensed professional. So
License
if you
or
are
degree.
or degree
Yep.
professional, yes. So if you're doing, most commonly we see SciTechs in the engineering field. So they have to show that they directly report to either engineer who's got a bachelor degree in engineering or a licensed engineer in order to qualify for that SciTech position.
Exactly. So when you start going down the TM professions list, the best way to look at it is if your profession appears on the list, you should have a degree that's either in that field or very closely related to it. And if your profession isn't on the list, unfortunately, you probably don't qualify for TN status. If your profession is not listed, then it's not a profession that the government decided that they want to provide visas for. And it applies to a lot of professions. We get a lot of individuals who may work in a field that is that in demand in the U.S. and we need workers. But unfortunately, this list is antiquated. They have not updated it. They did not update it with the new USMCA. And everybody keeps crying about both the list of professions as well as how to qualify.
Right.
For example, there's another profession on there where it's not explicitly listed, but you have engineer.
Mm-hmm.
But there's
a whole area of software engineers, and there's
Exactly.
actually a memo
Computer
out
engineers.
there that Customs and Border Protection had to place that says software engineers are engineers. So that was something that wasn't thought about back when these were written, and it's coming out as these cases come out to essentially make way for some computer programmers, software developers, because technology was not as advanced as it is now when the list came out.
The first list was the 90s.
It was like the late 90s, yes.
So it's come a long way since I was in high school.
No more dial-up internet.
Thankfully, no more dial-up. So that one was written into there as qualifying under the engineer category. And then there's also things that have been written out. So if you look at economists, for example, there were a lot of people applying under the economist profession that were financial analysts. Mm-hmm. And then USCIS came out and said, nope, financial analysts do not qualify as economists for TN status. So that one has been written out. You can't qualify for that. So there are a lot of interpretive memos that have come out over the years to help clarify who does and doesn't qualify for TN status. So the list isn't as straightforward as it may seem, because of these other components that you must be aware of if you're trying to obtain TN status. And when it comes to your credentials, qualifications for TN status, there are a lot of factors that go into it beyond just your degree or your experience. The job that you're being offered is very important in making sure that job actually appears on the list. Because if it's not on the list or you can't fit it into one of those occupations,
you're not getting the TN.
You may have to resort to an H-1B visa.
Yes. Which the H-1B visa, though, at least it can be more forgiving for
Very.
individuals who have foreign degrees. You're not tied down to those degree requirements like with the TN, where it has to be evaluated to a U.S. degree, or from U.S., Canada, or Mexico specifically. For an H-1B, it does have to be evaluated to a U.S. degree, but you can qualify based on work experience. You could qualify based on a foreign degree and work experience together. So there's
Very
many
important.
options to get you to
Yes.
qualify for a U.S. bachelor for an H-1B.
And the professions list is really anything that you can argue
Is
that
a specialty
requires
occupation.
a 4-year degree for entry into the profession. So you brought up, I think, our final point, and a very good one. And this is confusing for a lot of people, especially if you've worked in the U.S. on an H-1B before, and that's to qualify for TN status, you cannot combine degrees, and you cannot combine degrees and experience to equate to the degree you need for TN status. So you can't combine your 3-year degree plus 3 years of experience to meet a bachelor's requirement. Or you can't use, like for an H-1B, they have a 3-to-1 rule. So every 3 years of professional experience equates to 1 year of a college degree.
Correct. So if
So
you
you get
have
12
no
years.
college degree, no education, you would need to show 12 years of work experience to qualify for a U.S. 4-year bachelor degree.
And you cannot do that for a TN.
You cannot do it for a TN.
So
You're
your
correct.
degree has to stand alone.
Mhm.
You cannot combine it. If you're combining it and you show up to the port of entry and you have a degree evaluation and you combined your bachelor's degree or your diploma plus experience and now it's the qualifying degree, they won't accept it.
Correct. Even if you're combining, if you have a 2-year degree from University A and you're getting a 2-year degree from University B, you cannot combine it. The only thing that we've seen successful with combining degrees would be if you had a 3-year degree from this one university and you continued on at that university and got, say, a 1-year
Higher
master
degree.
from them,
Correct.
and they'll view it as continuation of
Yeah.
your degree rather than two separate.
Got a
But,
master's or PhD or whatever
correct,
at the same institution.
but that's still going to be at the discretion of the border officer.
Yeah, and the border and USCIS unfortunately don't follow the same procedures when they do this. Sometimes we'll go to the border and someone will get refused entry, but then we'll apply by mail with USCIS and then they'll approve it and then they go back with an approval and enter. So it's not an exact science. You do need to have a good understanding of the professions list and how you do qualify in order to qualify for TN status. So hopefully you enjoyed the conversation I had with Rachel today. I know I did. Good discussion about TNs and qualifying for TN status. If you have any other questions about TN visas or U.S. immigration matters in general, feel free to reach out. Subscribe to our channel, both on YouTube as well as follow our Arrive podcast so that you can see future content, and definitely recommend us to your friends, family, others out there that may find this content helpful. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day.